Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for jumping on the call. I'm so thankful that you're able to hop on and talk about financial freedom and a path to debt-free living. So just to get started, I do want to say this is a workshop, so we're going to have a couple of short breakout sessions. The session is being recorded, and right now your microphone is muted at the end. Actually, throughout the presentation, you are free to just pop a question into the chat. And if I don't see it during the presentation, I'll make sure that we address any questions towards the end. And then, all right, so I'm Terry Conley. I've been with Triangle Credit Union for a little over 16 years. I work in the marketing department, and I'm very excited about sharing a path to debt-free living with you. I spearhead a lot of financial literacy initiatives for the credit union, and this is probably one of my favorites. So I'm excited to share what I've learned in my experience over the years, and hopefully that will be something that will be helpful for you as well. So what we're going to be talking about tonight is the big deal about debt. Then we're going to introduce 5 steps to successfully get out of debt. We're going to explain a couple of the really cool tools, including the debt snowball and the debt avalanche method. And then I really want to one thing that you'll hear me talk about tonight is coming away with an action plan. So as we're going to spend the next 30 minutes together or so, I really want you to stop to think about, how does this apply to me? What can I take away so that I have action items that I can put into my own process and to get out of debt? So we're going to begin with just taking a couple of seconds to just close your eyes and imagine what your life would be like if you had no debt. If there were no monthly credit card bills coming in, no vehicle payments, no student loans. Think about your emotional health and stress-free living, what that looks like for you. So I'm just going to give you a couple of seconds to kind of just think about that. Now that we have this image in our mind of what stress or what debt-free living looks like, and it might include palm trees and tropical vacations or whatnot, but if we didn't have any debt, what would it be like? Would it be worry-free, low anxiety, reduced stress, freedom to do what you want to do? And that's the goal for debt-free living. But to get there, you have to address the problem head on. And we're going to do that as we go through the materials tonight. I just look at this image of this guy, and I have to tell you, I've been there. My husband and I had a mountain of debt years ago, and we basically followed these principles that I'm going to share with you tonight to get to a point where we're not living that way anymore. And it's for my own personal emotional health, mental health, it's been transformative. I'm the person in our relationship that pays the bills in terms of, making sure that our heat is paid and our cable is paid and whatnot. And so I know when you don't have enough income coming in and you've got all of these expenses and you have a mountain of credit card debt or whatever that looks like for you, it's very stressful. And I've lived that. Like I know what this guy is going through, right? And so if that's your challenge tonight, then I really hope that you can glean some items here that will be helpful. So let's talk a little bit about this debt cycle that we get in, right? And debt is a vicious cycle, and too often people are just like hamsters on the wheel. They can't get off. And unfortunately, the cycle has very damaging results. And, I would actually say that at any point you could jump into this cycle. It could start off with poor judgment, and that leads to stress and then diminished self-control or increased spending. Or you could jump in when you have too much stress, and then you diminish your self-control and you increase spending, and that causes poor judgment. So there's not any really one point in this nasty cycle that really says, okay, this is your starting point, and because you started here, you're going to end here. It's just a cyclical thing, and it has some pretty negative impacts, just in terms of your mental health, your emotional health. So that's what the really big deal about debt is, right? I mean, I think that I don't know statistically right now what the debt amount is for Americans, but I know that we're a country of consumerism. And, there are probably a very, very high percentage of Americans that are living with a mountain of debt right now. And it really doesn't need to be that way. So that's what we want to tackle tonight. Okay, so do you suffer from debt dread? You don't want to look at your bills when they come in, or they might keep you up at night. You don't want to go to the mailbox because you know that you've got some bills that are coming due or coming in, and you feel hopeless. But not only that, you might feel debilitated, and it limits what you can do, and it can steal your future. I have a story that it always reminds me of this. When there was a young lady and she was getting out of school, out of college, and she wanted to volunteer. And one of her goals was to kind of give back. She wanted to travel and, get into some type of volunteerism or whatever. But because she had a mountain of student loan debt, it limited her ability to do truly what she wanted to do, and limited her future. And that's what a lot of students, a lot of college kids are coming out of school these days with a mountain of student debt. And that really does limit what they can do. They have to typically get rid of college, and there's an expectation. It's like, okay, I'm out of college. I've got all of this. I've amassed all of this debt. Now I have to get an income. So it does steal your future. And that can be not only college debt, but it could also be just consumer debt. I got in this cycle where I would be like, oh, I can afford that because I can afford the monthly payment. And that's what we have to stop and take a step back and say, you know what, I could afford the payment, but what about the full debt? What does that look like for me, as a full amount rather than just a monthly payment? So, okay. So I know I've painted a pretty dim picture of what debt is, and I hope that we can all kind of resonate with that. But one of the things that I really want to focus on is the 5 steps to your success in terms of getting out of debt. So step number 1 is that we really have to acknowledge that there's a problem. And this is like psychology 101, right? You talk about getting to the root of your problems. And this is, in fact, a problem, right? So we need to recognize that we have got a problem. We've got a mountain of debt, and we want to address that. And we're going to head right into it by listing all of our debts. And that includes credit cards, personal loans, student loans, medical bills, vehicle payments, basically anything that we owe. So if you have a monthly payment that's going out that's not associated with any utilities, so that would be like your water, your heating, your energy. Those are your utility bills, right? We're not going to look at those, but we're just going to look at your debts. And what I'd like you to do is, in this first exercise, I'm going to give you about 3 minutes to do this. I know that's not a lot of time, but you can go back to it later if you forget anything. But what I'd like you to do is just grab a piece of paper and list your debts out with what the approximate balance is. And it doesn't have to be right to the penny, but if you have an approximate amount that says, okay, this is, I think this is what my balance is. If you happen to know your interest rate, that's great. And you can list it as well. And then I want you to write down what the minimum payment due is every month. So I'm going to set my timer for 2 minutes, and we're going to go through this little exercise. So grab a piece of paper and a pencil, and you can begin. Now that we have this list, that's our first breakout session, guys. So this is where you start. This is step number 1, acknowledging your debts. And we're going to move on from here just in terms of what we're going to be doing next. And then we're going to come back to using this list in a few minutes. So step number 2, now that you have the list, it might be a little bit overwhelming, but you're ready to do something about it, right? You've acknowledged it. So now let's do something about it. Resolving to do something about your debt is an amazing step in your journey. And what does it mean to resolve or to do something? It means to find an answer or a solution to something, to settle or solve something, to make definite or a serious decision to do something about your situation, and then to make a formal decision about what you're going to do. And that's where this plan is going to come into place that we're going to be talking about in just a few minutes and what that looks like for you. If you're on any path, you better have a plan to know where you're going, right? Whether you're taking a trip or whether you're trying to get your way out of debt. So when you create your plan, you want to follow some important steps. First is your budget. You should create a budget to know what your income is and what your expenses are every month. And we use a zero-based budget, which means you assign every dollar that's coming in that month. And basically, you're telling your money what to do each month. So when it comes to the budgeting debt, you want to start with just the minimum payments for each debt. And we'll go into that in just a few minutes. A couple of things that I would also say is that when you're going through the budget process, a lot of times people start off budgeting, they think it's a great idea, and then they get super frustrated. And it's typically because you can't follow the budget, right? You've veered off and you've already destroyed it and you're 2 days in. It takes 3 to 6 months for anybody to budget correctly. So we have some excellent tools, and I'm going to share at the end of our presentation where you can go. And if you haven't ever taken one of our budget webinars, then it's kind of like a workshop like this where you have some, we take a few minutes throughout the webinar to go over a couple of exercises. But the budgeting one that we have, it's available online. There's some fantastic online resources for you in terms of, listing out your expense sheet. And then actually there's a digital budgeting sheet that you can go in and play around with. So I'm going to share all of that, but it's going to be towards the end. So once you create your budget, you're going to try and do that at the beginning of the month. I already mentioned that it takes 3 to 6 months to really get a good grasp of the process. So don't let that, hinder you from doing it. And then any extra money that you might have that, when you get down to the end of the budget, like you've, allocated all of these line items, what you're looking for is that extra money. That means you have more money than you do expenses. And that's what we call margin, right? So margin is what you want to use to put towards your debt. And so that's what we're going to be looking for. So one of the first steps that you have to take, though, is to create that budget to know what you have available at the end of every month to put towards your debt. And again, that's called margin. So a couple of other things that I would just want to say is that we are going to show you a couple of tools for you to use tonight. Try to set a target date. If you don't have a target date, it's a missed mark every single time. You've got to draw that line in the sand that says, on this date, I'm going to be debt free. And again, sometimes based on the margin that you have and the tool that you use, it will dictate what your target date is, but just be consistent about trying to meet that date. So executing a plan is a pivotal step in any process because this is where you have to take action. Sometimes people resist this step because they're fearful of a misstep or a mistake, but how will you know if you don't move to do something, right? So if you're concerned or you're hesitant, it's good to gain confidence by talking to someone that you trust. And so that is your trust person. So when you think about who should my trust person be? Who should hold me accountable? This is someone that you can discuss your situation with, who will encourage you and keep anything that you tell them private. It's someone that you feel comfortable in bouncing ideas off from, but it is also somebody who's going to hold you accountable. The execution of your plan may mean drastic measures are taken, like not carrying debit or credit cards in order to minimize your spending. In this instance, excuse me, you'll have to determine how much cash you're going to carry, which is going to be based upon your budget. It also may mean that you cut up your credit cards and have weekly check-ins with your accounting ability partner leading up to your target date to stay on the course. And then now we'll also talk a little bit about some of the tools again in just a few minutes. Step number 5 is monitor the results and repeat. So you have to monitor your plan daily, which means you have to see it. You can print it out and make it available. So it's just something that you see every day. I know it sounds a little bit radical, but it's necessary because what you focus on is what becomes important to you. And that's where you're going to spend your energy and your money, right? So I did this before I got married. I had student loan debt, I had credit card debt. And this was something that before my husband and I, even started talking about, financial matters and stuff like that. But it was a personal goal that I had before I wanted to get married. And I had a poster and I drew all of my debts on this poster. And I don't know if you guys ever remember, and I'm dating myself a little bit, but there would be like, I know there would be like posters up in my old workplace that would show like a thermometer. And as we were reaching goals for, like, it was usually like a giving thing, where like we would color in this thermometer. And I was doing it backwards, right? Because I was trying to go down in debt. But anybody who came over to my apartment when I was in, this is like, 3 or 4 years out of college, they would see exactly where my debt was. And I just didn't care because it was that top of mind for me. And, I don't know if they thought I was a little bit weird, but I'm just saying, keep it in scope, whether it's in your, like in your office somewhere, if you have a home office, wherever it is, on your bathroom wall, but someplace that you can see it every day so that you know that this is what I've got to work on. Okay, so we talked about 5 steps. Now let's talk a little bit about what kind of tools we might want to use. You may have heard of this. This is the particular tool that I used to get out of debt. It was the debt snowball. And this is where you list all of your debts from smallest to largest, and you pay all that you can toward the smallest debt first while making minimum payments on your other debts. And then once your smallest debt is paid, you take the payment that you had been applying to that small debt, and then you apply it to the next debt. And again, you want to put this somewhere so that you can see it visually. So this was a while ago. This was back in 2021. This was what our my debt structure looked like in 2021. So at the top, you can see that I listed out all of my debts. I had Citi Card had a balance of $1,200. Triangle, there was a personal loan, $593. Bank of America I think it was a credit card, and they had $3,800, and then PayPal had $400. So in practice of the debt snowball, I listed all of my debts, smallest to largest, and PayPal was only $400. So I paid, looking what I had left over from my budget, which I'm just gonna, let's see, it looked like I had about 250, 350, 470. I think I had about $470 every month that I could apply to debt. So I applied all that, well, if you go down to the Triangle one, the minimum payment due on Triangle was $50. The minimum payment due on Citi Card was $100, and then Bank of America was $120. So I had to satisfy the minimum payments on those debts. Then I took anything that I had left over and I put it towards PayPal. So it ended up being $200. So you can see where, I did that in March. If you go down to the chart below, in March, it was $200. In April, it was $200. Then in May, I didn't have my PayPal anymore, right? So I took my next smallest debt, which was the Triangle one, and I put the $200 that I was paying towards PayPal now went to Triangle. So that was $250 in May, and then $243 in June. And then in Citi Card, now I've got the $100 that I've been paying in Citi Card and the $250 that I had been paying to Triangle. And then I add that and I apply that to that debt. And then as you can see, it went, it goes down, right? That's why it's called the snowball. It's like picking up momentum as it's going down. And then the Bank of America is when I just started like banging out the $470 after that. So the debts avalanche is a little bit different. This is where you list all of your debts from highest interest rate to the lowest interest rate. And the principles after that are very similar to the debt snowball, where you're going to pay all that you can toward the highest interest rate first while making minimum payments to your other debts. Once your highest interest rate debt is paid, then you're going to take that payment and apply it to the next debt. And then again, you want to post it somewhere where you can see it frequently. So the debt avalanche, if I had used this tool, this is what it would look like. So the Citi Card, now this goes back to 2021, right? And I might have even had like an intro rate on this because I know right now interest rates are much higher than what these interest rates were. But Citi Card had 12%, Triangle was 8%, Bank of America was 11%, and then PayPal was 19%. It just so happened that PayPal was not only my smallest debt, but it was also the highest interest. So I started with PayPal for both of these, basically. If I was going to use this method, I would still start with PayPal. So I would put any extra income that I had after minimum payments were due or paid on all of the other debts, I would just apply it to PayPal. Then Citi Card. Now I've been paying $100 to Citi Card, $200 to PayPal. PayPal is gone now. So now I'm going to take that $300 in May of 2021, and I'll start to hit the Citi Card debt. And then Bank of America. Bank of America was 11%. So I started, end up being $420 a month starting in September after PayPal and Citi was done, while making regular payments still on the minimum payment due for Triangle. Now, here's the reason why I like the debt snowball method better than the debt avalanche. Psychologically, I want to see debts coming off my spreadsheet faster than I know that some people get kind of caught up in like the interest rate. Well, like I don't want to pay as much interest rate, but there is a psychological factor in seeing those debts disappear. And with Bank of America, like, I ended up, having to struggle with Bank of America for much longer than I would have with Triangle. So that's why I chose the debt snowball method, but it comes down to your own personal preference. If you were doing using either one of these tools, I applaud you. I'm going to say that, right? This is where it starts. There are other, you can go out on the web. These are known debt reduction tools. And so if I haven't explained it correctly, I apologize, but please go out and look, do your own research online. There's more information about debt avalanche and debt snowball. So those are the really cool tools that I wanted to introduce tonight to you. Now, Triangle also has a money management tool through online banking. And this tool provides a financial snapshot of all of your accounts. Plus, you can add outside accounts for an accurate assessment of your debt and your net worth. And as a budgeting tool, it tracks spending on different areas. So anytime you use your debit card, the tool will determine where and what you spent and assign the expense. And it helps you keep track of transactions, spending, any debt reduction. So it's worth checking out. If you haven't looked at money management, I encourage you to do that. All right, so let's go on to creating your debt-free plan. So this is where the rubber meets the road, I guess is what they say, right? So decide which tool you want to use. So that's either the debt snowball or the debt avalanche, whichever you feel is most, comfortable with for you. Then you want to follow the 5 points of success, where number 1, acknowledge the problem. Number 2, resolve to do something about it. Number 3, create your plan. Number 4, execute your plan. And then number 5, monitor the results and repeat as long as it takes to get this debt out of the way. In my experience, if you stop borrowing money and stop buying stuff, you might find margin in your budget. So with me, I'm not a big shopper, so that's kind of tongue in cheek. But I will say that for me, I really try to focus on things like, how can I get a part-time jobs where I can have a little bit of extra money coming in so that it can go strictly to debt, so that I can bang this debt out faster. So you can find a hobby, something that you're passionate about, maybe make it a money maker. There's a lot of great online resources now, like Etsy, if you like to, you're crafty, or there's lots of outlets, consignment stores, if you just want to sell stuff. I'm a big self-help person in terms of reading. So I always like to, when I'm going through something like this, I would encourage you to look at some debt-free living, like, books that encourage you to live debt-free. And then again, going back to generating money to pay off your debt, either sell some stuff, get a part-time job, little side hustle. I will also say that we do have some great financial planning resources, and it's Triangle Financial Group. So once you get into the groove of, getting out of debt and you're ready to turn that curve where it's like, now I actually have some more money that I'm ready to invest, I really would encourage you to take a look at Triangle Financial Group. They're a bunch of great people that really know how to take it to the next level for you. So in terms of resources, this is what I would encourage you to. My first book that when I was getting out of debt was Dave Ramsey's Total Money Makeover. I read that for, I think, 3 years. It took me 3 years to get out of debt when I was getting out of college. So I read it every year while I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to try and motivate myself. So I'm going to read this every year until I'm completely out of debt. Your Best Year Ever by Michael Hyatt, Finish by John Acuff, The Heart to Start by David Kadavi, and then The 30-Day Money Cleanse by Ashley Gertzley. Those are all great. If you are you like to read and motivate yourself in this journey, then I encourage you to take a look at those. And then we have a ton of financial literacy materials available to you on our blog site, which is actually triangleuniversity.org. If you want to watch on-demand webinars, whether it's budgeting or this webinar will be on there. There's a credit building webinar. There's just a bunch of webinars on there, all at your convenience. You can sit down and watch those. We have articles, lots of different articles. We have our podcast, it's called Making Money Personal podcast. That's available as well. So depending on how you like to get your financial information, your education, triangleuniversity.org is a great place to start. And again, if you haven't budgeted, please start there. I believe that there's a resources tab, and under the resources tab, you will find a couple of different things on budgeting. So please start there. Okay. And then I think that that's pretty much it. Thanks so much, guys. I really appreciate it. Stay warm. Okay. Have a good night.